quickly caught us.
Right. Good morning, everybody, to first of the year 2024 West Salem Redevelopment Advisory Board. Welcome, Councilor Varney. And Linda, the floor is yours for roll call.
Okay, thank you. Ashley Morey? Jeremy McKay? No. John Hannum?
Present.
Jason Stats?
Present.
Samantha Ross?
Present.
Thank you. Mark Smith?
Here.
Thomas Crozier?
Here.
And we also have Councilor Varney in attendance.
Great. Just need a quick approval of the agenda. Any changes, discussion? If I can get a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Agenda passes. And approval of December 6 minutes. Need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
The second.
Second that motion.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain. I don't think I was at that meeting. Minutes are approved. And it doesn't look like we have any public comment scheduled this morning. So we'll move on to our action items. Looks like, Tori, you want to talk about going back to in-person meetings.
Sure. So this was brought up by the group last month. And to formalize it, you'd have to take action. So we've been, since COVID, virtual. So in this case, now that virtual has been the way of things, we'll have to be hybrid going forward. So it'll be similar to how the Downtown Advisory Board works. We'll meet in person at the Urban Development offices where we have ADA accessible restrooms. People can go there too. And we'll broadcast online just like we do now. So it'll be, if the group chooses to take action. So I kind of framed it in a way that you could use the text in there, but you can make it whatever you want. But it's just a formality to start doing the hybrid meet in person going forward.
Great. Was that, I mean, if that's the consensus of the group, and this discussion was had last month, I could certainly be on board with that. Just makes for a little bit earlier of a morning.
Tori, I know you said that it would be streamed online. Would it also be through Zoom meetings as well as an option?
Linda, I don't know if you or Margarita can speak to that. Cherie too. I think it's mostly in person, but we stream it to YouTube. I'm not sure if there are any other participants over Zoom. It's likely that we have to make that accommodation, but I'm not sure how it's been handled.
You're exactly correct, Tori. I would typically just set up the Zoom meeting and send it to a staff person here, so a couple of us have it. And then I would stream it live to YouTube, but the Zoom invite piece of it would not be at this point available to members should they want to tune in that way. They would just have to watch the meeting. If we wanted to go that route, it would become a little bit more technical and we'd have to figure out how to make that happen.
So the general public would still be able to join via Zoom if they were providing public testimony?
We would have to make that happen, yes.
Great.
I think the emphasis would be to meet in person. So when we put it out there to say, hey, we were meeting in person, and then there'd be that discussion, you know, if there's a preference to provide that accommodation virtually, then we do what we could to accommodate that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I missed the discussion on this one because I'm sure it was a good one. But what is everybody else here? I mean, is this also a push from the city as well to start having an in-person
No, this was a
meeting?
conversation. Actually, I was surprised John brought it up from Portland. He's like, when are we going to start meeting in person? And then everyone chimed in. So this was not anything to do with staff or city.
Okay.
This was all a discussion by the board.
I think we should, I think it's a great idea to start meeting back in person. So if we wanted to start that discussion, since I've been on the board, I think maybe there was one instance where there was public comment. And that's been like, what, 3 years now, Tori, that I've been on the board, 2 years? Is there anyone on the board, any board members that would not be able to attend the first Wednesday?
I would have to rearrange some things in my schedule since I have a meeting directly after this, but it would be doable.
Okay, perfect.
I'll go with the consensus of the group. If y'all want to meet in person, then I'm on board.
Cool.
So, I mean, if the group already discussed it during the last meeting and the majority, I know that we still don't have Jeremy and Ashley here. Does anybody remember what their thought process was on that? Were they pretty on board with meeting in person?
I don't recall, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think generally we just thought most other boards meet in person. We probably could do that too. And we also thought there was potentially just a different level of interaction if we're all together.
Yeah. I think that's what it
Great.
was. Just
Yeah, if
a different level of interaction where, I mean, you physically see somebody and it just creates a little bit of a different dynamic. You know, I just wanted to put out there a thought too. I don't know if, you know, just from a practical standpoint, this could perhaps be reviewed later too. From the standpoint of just having that interaction and getting to know everybody, maybe have quarterly in person and then the rest of the meetings Zoom is a possibility. I don't know if that's something that might be worth considering as well too. Maybe down the road, see how it goes. I don't know if this then becomes a final decision. I'm good either way with it. I see pros and cons to both. And when I originally sent in the application, I was thinking that it would be an in-person meeting. So I'm completely fine with everybody's decision, but if it's also an inconvenience for others too, I mean, a possible solution might be to do a mix of both, like having a quarterly in-person meeting and then the rest of the meetings online. Just a thought.
Right. Well, it sounds like everybody here is okay with moving to in-person meetings. So if we want to move forward with that, we would just need a motion.
Motion
Really
to,
quickly, for those making the motion, I think it's important to note the date and time that it's in person location. It's just something we'll have to have one for the record for the minutes for this meeting. Also, just to be noted going forward. That's basically how it's framed in the bylaws too. So it'll just be formalized.
and location would still be at the prior
The
location.
urban development offices, yeah, downtown Salem, like it was before.
Do we need to actually state the physical address?
Not the address. I have it down so that I could put it in the. I don't know if we have chat. So basically, I have on the agenda meet in person at the urban development department first Wednesday of the month at 7:30 a.m.
I'd like to make a motion for what Tori just said. I make a motion to meet in person at the Urban Development office downtown Salem the first Wednesday at 7:30 a.m.
Well
I'll
done,
second
Sam.
it.
Thank you, John. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Motion passes. Uh, and off to the next. Well done, everybody. Well, it'll be great to see you all in person in February.
So
Let's
really
see, we
quickly,
have
I'll preface this one too. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, just for the next action item for the budget. So this follows our discussion last month on budget priorities. So we have Michael, who's the financial manager, who will go into more detail on basically what you'll see and what the um, volunteer group, the budget committee, will see going forward into the budget season as we start that in the new year. So thank you for taking the time, Michael.
Pleasure to be here, of course. Well, like a malign Santa Claus, I appear before you every year about this time and give you greetings and good news, I hope. Let me share screen here. Not very versed in Zoom, so everyone have that? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I just need to make it a full screen, I guess. Okay, again, this is our annual commencement of the budget process. You all have been through, I think most of you have been through this before, but the budget development starts taking place now. And then in April, there will be 4 scheduled meetings of the city budget committee. And then there's an alternate meeting towards the end of May if it's necessary. And then the budget committee will be doing its work. And then council will review the budget, of course, in June and has to be adopted for the commencement of the fiscal year on July 1st. I'm sure that most of you are aware of the conversations that have been happening around the general fund and that kind of thing. And of course, these are what we're talking about now is segregated. So let's just talk big picture for a moment. And this slide was created to kind of show you what the result of what's been happening since not since the URA was created, but certainly in the last few years. And that gray line that you see there along the bottom at about the $140 million mark is what's called the frozen value. I think probably most of you are aware of what frozen value is, so I won't belabor that one. And then the blue and the yellow are the assessments that have been reported by the Polk County Assessor's Office. And the excess value, which is where we draw our tax increment, has been gradually increasing. So the URA is working as intended, I guess, is the best way to describe this, which is, doing short-term borrowings to create projects that will increase overall value over time. That short-term borrowing, this chart is designed to show you about when you'll run out of borrowing capacity, when you'll hit your max indebtedness. And that orange line at the bottom is pretty linear, which is fine. And the gray line at the top that gradually goes down to 0 in 2029 is when we anticipate that the URA will hit its max indebtedness and will not be able to borrow anymore, barring an amendment. And I don't know if Tori's started that conversation or not, but that's kind of where we're anticipating it'll be. So moving on to the fiscal year 25 details. I need to go to a different screen now. I need to go to a different screen now. I need to go to a different screen now. Okay.
As Michael's transitioning, any questions about frozen tax base or maximum indebtedness? These are terms that we've talked about, but it's not every meeting that it's discussed. So happy to, either I can speak to it or Michael can get into it a little bit more.
Can you dive into, thanks for asking, Tori, can you dive into the maximum indebtedness?
So when the urban renewal area was created and the urban renewal plan was established, there's basically all urban renewal areas have a duration, a limited duration. It's not intended to be there forever. So what that means is the maximum amount, everything that we do is debt funded. So even du jour is this term that's referenced when you look at this type of material. It's even though you have the money set aside over the years, like Second Street's a good example, it still isn't paid for with that money on hand. You still technically do this quick borrow. You know, you don't go out to, you know, formally like a loan to do a big bond, but it's still a debt. You'd still do a day, you know, a quick transfer to say, okay, we're going to borrow this money and pay it immediately back. So basically what that does is it over time starts, and that's what he shows on the chart, is it starts to tick away at the maximum amount that you can do, basically. And so what's been done in other areas like North Gateway area is there's a one-time adjustment for inflation. And so there's a higher level discussion that needs to happen with urban renewal and the urban renewal agency generally. So that's why it hasn't been really something brought back here, because we want to get a sense of, you know, what that looks like at the agency level. But that's ultimately what it is it's basically at what point will this urban renewal area expire?
Thank you, that makes sense.
Okay, so here is the details of your fiscal year 25 budget, pending your review and input and approval. And essentially, we've got 3 columns here, which is the budget for 24, what my estimate of where you're going to be at the end of the year in 24, and the proposed for fiscal year 25. There are 2 funds represented here. We were just talking about the max indebtedness, and that's what's represented here in this debt fund, which is basically how much money we think we'll collect in tax increment that allows us to borrow and put down here into the construction fund, which is where all this is the fun part. This is where you all like this to be. And so these are pretty straightforward. All the projects that you have apparently talked about and contemplated are represented. Second Street, of course, is not fully done, so we're representing some amount of money to be carried over into fiscal year 25 to finish that off. That may adjust higher or lower depending on how far along the project gets by the end of this fiscal year. But that's really the total cost of that's already kind of baked into the cake. And that's just a matter of allocating the different pieces there. So Tori indicated there were 2 new projects. One was called the Small Projects Fund for $200,000. And then the path improvements to the Union Street Railroad Bridge from the street that I can't remember, even though I live in West Salem. Tori mentioned it the other day. I'm like, boy, I've never been on that street. But anyway.
Yeah, most aren't familiar with it, but it's not just that. It's really going up from Wallace, the intersection of Wallace. So that's why it's a bit vague on this description. Because if you were to list it as Musgrave Avenue, unless you go into the park right there, you try to use it as a shortcut to get around congestion. Most people aren't familiar with Musgrave right there at the gateway to the Wallace Marine Park. So if it would be definitely limited in funding and scope if it were just simply crossing from Musgrave to the Union Street Railroad Bridge. So in this case, it's a bit broader because there's some enhancements under the overpass that need to be done for safety. And anyway,
Sure. Well, as I said, I've never heard of Musgrave, and I actually live there, or in West Salem. So, but anyway, that's kind of how it lays out, and you will have. There's about $1.2 million that will be available for future projects, and your max indebtedness is right there and is on track again to expire about fiscal year 29, we think. And if there's anything more I can expound on, I will. But this is one of the simpler ones. Thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Hey, Tori, where is the ongoing development of Marine Drive, kind of the purchase of additional property and stuff that was allocated from the last bond that passed? Is any of that in here, or
it's outside of the urban renewal area.
And that's what I thought, but I just wanted to.
So we did have initially with Second Street, Marine Drive was a critical piece to that, and there's been issues with the southern section, especially south of Glen Creek, that would be in the urban renewal area. So to my understanding, given the vicinity to, basically have to be like Front Street where it'd run, where you have right now access into Wallace Marine Park, it would be kind of this busy roadway abutting the park. So for that reason, there have been issues, but also there's a lot of multifamily housing and things along that side. So that south section that would be in the urban renewal area has been, to my understanding, it's not, I haven't heard anything about it really moving forward. I know that they're doing a lot of work to the north, but nothing that I'm aware of to the south.
Budget looks pretty straightforward.
It is very straightforward, and it's not in deficit, so that's always a positive in my world.
For ease too,
do we have any other questions about it? Oh, go ahead, Tori.
Looks like Councilor Varney has a question.
I had a quick question. Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. So what's the process when a new project pops up during the year?
So new projects, we try to anticipate it. So that's why it's so similar to this bridge connection piece. It's been a conversation at the neighborhood level with you guys. We've done the bike tour, and different people have met to discuss. So we try to anticipate it up front. We do have the small project fund, and that's one of the about $200,000 a year. So that's kind of like a catch small opportunities. If there's something of significance that comes across, to Michael's point, there's a carryover. So then we'd have to go probably through a budget authority process to go, get a recommendation from the advisory board, take it to the urban renewal agency to see, if it's a priority you want to fund, and adjust accordingly.
Okay. Could this tie into the Edgewater path at all? The repairs that are needed along there?
Right. So repairs would be, it's not an urban renewal project. You basically have to lay out a new path, but we are connecting that. That's what this, so if you follow the Edgewater Parkway through Wallace, this is the piece that goes underneath the exit ramp. So we're trying to get it. So right now we meet out there and people don't know where to go if they do take that route, because they either have to go into Wallace Marine Park at Musgrave or go back to Wallace and follow it all the way around to the bridge. And so we're looking for a direct shot to make it simpler. So this will be a new section that could be funded with urban renewal. So unless the agency wanted to build a whole new street, we'd have to coordinate with ODOT because they're right away, or a whole new Edgewater Parkway. The improvements themselves, I think, we've walked it. It looks like Public Works has been actively out there grinding down to make it more. I know there's still some sections behind buildings and places where it's probably not the best or even usable by ADA, but yeah, it'd have to be, we'd have to lay out where that new path would go, work with ODOT, develop a maintenance plan going forward once it's constructed, because it wouldn't be an urban renewal funded effort, and then build it if that were to be a priority.
Okay, thank you. And it's good to hear there's some work going on back there. I haven't been out talking or writing it for a while.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Counselor, if I can add on to what Tori was talking about procedurally, obviously, and you're probably aware of this, but there are limitations to how much you could do something mid-year for a large project that's bound by Oregon budget law. So typically these projects are big, and so as a consequence, they need to get into the capital improvements plan, which is a separate document. And so it takes some time. It's like steering a big ship, obviously. So it's very difficult to do a big project right in the middle.
Right, that's where this improvement. So we've had to do the same thing where we anticipate, because there's been a lot of interest in improving this connection. And I think, if it were to be successful, that Edgewater Parkway will be utilized more, and then we'll identify more areas where, we could do maybe smaller improvements to make it safer, or, further grind down areas where it's had some upheaval. But there's been a lot of emphasis to have this connection. So to get everyone on board with that, we have the financing piece, but then we have the engineering. So to Michael's point, we've been in contact with Public Works, and to get at that resource allocation so they have the actual staff and expertise and people they can dedicate to it. Yeah, there's this budget piece, but then there's the capital improvement side too that we're aligning with. So we'll have that piece in, but if something else comes up, that's why we have this smaller project, so we can address it with a smaller project fund. If it's anything bigger, it would take, you'd have to look at design, you'd have to look at capital improvement, engineering. So it'd be a bigger effort to, maybe it'd be a later year effort if it were to happen.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask you one more question?
Sure thing.
I couldn't find my little raise hand button earlier when you were talking about, I wanted to ask you about the one-time adjustment for inflation that you mentioned. What is that based on, and when does that occur? I mean, if it's only one time, over what is the length of time? And then, as I said, how is that determined?
I think it has to be, is that 1% adjustment? I don't remember what the actual amount is. Well, it really sets, with this maximum indebtedness, it creates a new maximum indebtedness number. So it could push that out to whatever year, depending on what that number is. And so we'd have to look at it financially. My understanding is there have been discussions about like a work session or some kind of agency meeting to get a sense, like as an update on urban renewal, the current state of things in all the urban renewal areas, and then to address some of these things. Like I know that like Mill Creek Corporate Center, Mill Creek Industrial Park urban renewal area has a similar, we're coming close to that maximum indebtedness as well. So I think there are a few of these they're going to probably be discussed soon. I don't know, Michael, offhand, if there's, I'm not sure exactly what that amount would look like or what it would translate into with new maximum indebtedness and therefore new, instead of fiscal year 29, that would be 35 or what that time frame is. We'd have to look at it.
Yeah, I would certainly be happy to look into it and respond to everyone with some kind of number and what the impact would be, but don't want to speculate off the top of my head because I'm just not that versed in the one-time inflation component.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions for Michael? And Michael, thank you again for the presentation. And Tori, we need to have a motion to recommend this budget. Is that correct?
Right. And again, for ease of use, I did kind of frame loosely a recommendation. You can follow, you can put whatever you want in there. I just know I do some work like that too in advisory capacity. So it always, when you're in the moment, it's like I had it planned to say the motion and then I don't have it in front of me. So really that's all that it's there for. So by all means, if you want to reference it, you can, or state it how you want. But yes, we'll need a recommendation for the budget.
Were there any anticipated expenditures that were determined by urban renewal to leave out, or the city to leave out of this? I guess I have that question. What didn't make the cut? Where's that list?
I think everything we've wanted to do has been funded. I would say, you know, in the small projects fund has been the discussion of like gateway signs, but we're looking at ways to, you know, maybe creatively work around that, because it's been hard to get like a gateway sign in the ODOT right of way. So there's not really in the urban renewal area, for the most part, what the group has wanted to see has been funded. I think the next priority would be this connection to the Union Street Road Bridge. One of the things that's been cut, I think, is the undercrossing. You know, it was going to be this extension under Wallace, but it was $30 million. And so it would be definitely more funding than what's available in the urban renewal fund. But that would be the only thing in my mind that would require all the pieces coming together too. So if you were to go from 2nd Street under Wallace Road, you have nowhere to land right now. So that south section of Marine Drive would have to be in place. So you'd have to fund that piece, and you'd have to do the actual undercrossing of Wallace. So that would be the only thing that I'm aware of that's fallen off, given the complexity, expense, and it also drew out. I think Samantha mentioned the last time we had a lot of people attending for public comment, that when that was the topic, we had a lot of people coming out to say, we don't want a hole, or it's going to flood, or it's going to take out my business. So that would be the only thing I'm aware of.
And from a process standpoint, of course, for this coming fiscal year, you all are you're the start for this particular fund. So it's entirely possible that the agency or the budget committee or the council eventually, says, no, we're not going to do the path improvements project. But for right now, this is what you all are recommending goes forward. So everything is sweetness and light at the moment. And there's no anticipated change because there's no anticipated financial difficulties in this fund.
So because we haven't made any additional recommendations as an advisory board, we're not seeing any other line items on this particular budget. Is that correct, Tori? Like, we had lots of discussion earlier, or in the later part of last year, about what we might like to see, like a retaining wall on Edgewater, or new bathrooms, or potentially a new path. But because we didn't recommend those particular improvements, they aren't here. Is that
right? I mean, some of those, if you were to say like a bathroom, that would involve like the Parks Master Plan. There's a lot of pieces that touch that. So if that was a priority, everyone would have to be on board, and we'd bring in Parks, Public Works, to see how that aligns with their efforts, if they have the support to maintain something like that. Because again, we could build it but not maintain it. So yeah, if that's, I think my understanding was all the influence that was kind of being pressed was this connection with the path. That can shape, over the next year, into a recommendation for the fiscal year 26 when Mike comes back around. If it was an effort to see, like at West Salem Park, updated bathrooms again, it would have to be a totally new project. Would have to replace what was already existing there, and then it'd have to align with what Public Works can support and Parks could, fit in their plan. So that would take, again, more formality if you wanted to do it. But if it took off, that would be something that would, over the course of the year, we discuss, and it would work its way into the next budget recommendation potentially.
great? Thank you. Right. Any last questions? We're going to need a motion to, it sounds like to recommend this budget and move forward with it.
Motion to recommend and move forward with this budget.
Do you need, let's see here.
I can second that unless we need more formal language around the motion.
I have a first and a second. Tori, are we okay with the language?
I think it's fine. I just had the specific fiscal year on there, but it's, you know, it's again a recommendation to the agency, so it's fine.
Right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Motion passes. Michael, thank you again for being here.
Yeah, always a pleasure. And I'll see you again next year.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Tori, you've got the floor with development projects for downtown Salem.
Yeah. Wanted to thank Cherie too for taking the time to join us at the advisory board. It's always a pleasure having her, and funny, I see her all the time. And so it was, when the group mentioned having her talk about, because there are a lot of development projects happening in the downtown or renewal area. So she's the expert in all things downtown, and has a good pulse on what's happening there, and you know, the work that's being done. And so I just thank you, Cherie, for coming, and so she'll be able to speak a little bit more in detail on those things since the group wanted to know more about the happenings.
I'll start over again. Good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. And thank you. I love it when you invite me to come. However, right now, with all the stuff that Tori tells me is going on in West Salem, you guys are just really at a moment for some opportunities. And it's interesting, Jason, hearing your comments about, you know, some project ideas. And I'll interweave in my conversation this morning how we talk about projects and how they then touch our budget. Kind of the timing's interesting because I'll be going into my budget discussion with my board. And so kind of how we bring back to the board some of the projects that we've identified and have discussed with them over the years to see if that's something they want to recommend in a budget they move forward to the agency board. I also want to make sure that I make this valuable for you. So if any of you have a question about something that you want to ask me right now so that I don't lose the opportunity of answering it, please feel free before I get going, because once I get going, then I get all excited, but I don't want to not answer something that you may have in the midst of my presentation. Anybody have any burning question that they want to know? Okay, I bet you will when I'm done. So right now in downtown, we have that combination of new housing construction at the same time that we want to honor and preserve our historic downtown. And then, you know, for the first time, we're really taking a look at where the next level of opportunities are, because downtown is pretty much built out. So Riverfront Urban Renewal Boundary goes north. So we have the waterfront area along Front Street, which was always kind of put on the back burner because of the railroad and the transportation challenges there. And then, you know, it kind of goes up High Street. So we're kind of doing infill in downtown right now on our last sites that we actually have the opportunity to build something new. So you probably saw in the paper that I just processed and got approval from the agency board for a grant for new construction of housing at 277 High Street. That would be, we call it the Diamond Lot, but it's at High and Chemeketa on the corner. Next to it, going west, you may recall there was that former Wells Fargo bank. It kind of looked like, it was all marble, kind of looked like a mausoleum. It was taken down and there's a pit there now. The developer for the High Street site also has control for the 280 Liberty Street site, but they're starting with probably the one that would be less complicated because it's not in the historic district. It's not going to require a lot of the elements for having your building have similar products and features to the historic building that was taken down. So they're starting on 277 first, and that's going to be the first project that is kind of unique for downtown in that it will have 98 rental market units, and then on the ground floor, it's going to have 7 live work. And so that will be that first option where somebody could possibly make jewelry and then want to have an opportunity to sell jewelry out of the ground floor space that they have, depending on how they configure the unit that they have. So very excited to see what that is going to look like, because it's not very many units, but it'll be the first option for somebody to live and also work in their same space. That's also going to kind of be a good test for, we continue to try to reduce the vehicular traffic in downtown. It'll be something that will be an ongoing challenge as housing no longer requires the one-to-one parking that it did in the past. No parking is required for housing. Right now, a lot of the residents are taking advantage of parking on street because if you get home at, depending on what time you get home at 5, enforcement's 8 to 8. So, you have 3 hours. So then you can, stay on the street because, 8 o'clock's going to come and you're fine. And then you're gone in the morning because, you have until 11 o'clock because of the 3 hours that's available on street. So as we put more housing units in downtown, the next piece of the conversation is going to be the parking for those residents, because those residents are very beneficial to supporting the downtown businesses. We're very excited to have them, but the parking will be interesting as we move forward. So one of the things that the board is looking at is Marion Parkade. It's our largest parking structure in downtown. Ribbonwood is very close to that parking structure. So we're looking at the residents wanting to use that parking structure. It really doesn't contribute much to the look and feel of that neighborhood. And again, we're knowing that the growth is going to be north. And so hopefully when our budget goes in front of the agency board, they're going to see a continuation to fund improvements to Marion Parkade. I wish I could show you kind of the initial look and feel of a facelift where we're opening up the stairwells and adding more lighting and color to actually have it contribute to the vibrancy instead of it looking, well, institutional and not real pleasant. The second piece of that's going to be to help increase security and the use of that parking structure. There's also lots of challenges with those stairs being enclosed, with them being used for the wrong purposes, and increasing the cost then to keep them clean and maintained. So kind of multi-purpose redo of Marion Parkade to address some structural issues that are the consequences, unfortunately, of all the cleaning that we've had to do in the stairwells, and to also give it a new look and feel so that it is inviting and contributes in a way to help the residents want to use it and the businesses customers want to use it. So we kind of have this moment where we have historic buildings that are adding housing units to it, in addition to brand new from the ground up new projects. So Riverwood will be done in the spring, and then Citizens Apartment, which is the name of the one at 277. And then I anticipate after that, the location where the pit is would be kind of the next one to happen. And then really, with the exception of what we have hopefully the opportunity across the street from our office here, when you come down for your meetings, it'll be exciting for you because you will be able to look right across the street and see what's happening at Block 50. We're at the end of our process to select who will be redeveloping that with us. And so that is a very exciting kind of next step that should be happening hopefully by the end of January. And we'll be able to share the concept and who we'll be working with, but that will be significant in that it will really kind of jumpstart north of Chemeketa, because right now in downtown, you kind of have, unfortunately, Court Street. Anything south of Court Street, that's where you want to be. Anything, unfortunately, north of Court Street or north of Chemeketa is the area where we've had, properties kind of become vacant. Pennies went vacant. Liberty Plaza's been vacant. And unfortunately, the mall has had quite a bit of loss of tenants. So, and then we had the pit. So right now we have a lot of energy and a lot of private investment going into that area. So again, wait, because that's going to be the next hot spot for a lot of redevelopment in downtown. Because again, that's where the opportunities are. Block 50 for new construction. Liberty Plaza is vacant, so it's only going to get better, and there's a new owner for it. Same with the Pennies building. Don't know what's happening there, even though we hate the loss of Rite Aid. It's another opportunity for some type of redevelopment. And Salem Center has been for sale and is currently under contract, and that will be a great opportunity. My crystal ball kind of tells me that probably with Salem Center, you may see something really exciting and different happen on the south side. Maybe they'll take that down and they'll do a mix of uses, including housing. That wouldn't be the case on the north side because Kohl's is such a significant anchor there and it's attached to the parkade. You would want to keep the retail there, but it's a great opportunity for somebody to do something very different than we've ever seen. So again, that whole little area around Salem Center with the Citizens Apartment, with what may happen at the pit, what we know is going to be happening at Liberty Plaza, and then with Pennies, Ribbonwood, a little bit further north, I think you're going to see some really, really exciting things happen in downtown. So for us as a board, Downtown Advisory Board wears two hats. They wear a hat for general fund because of the downtown parking district. So they make a recommendation to the city council for all things related to the 3 parking garages in downtown. Then they take that hat off and they put on their hat and make recommendations in regards to the riverfront urban renewal area. It's always challenging for them because we can do some exciting things and we try to build off of every investment that we make with riverfront, but at the same time, the parking district model has been broken for a long time. And so we have challenges with that particular type of parking management system in a downtown. A performance-based management system would be better. And so again, hopefully in the future, that's something that we'll be able to consider, where basically the users of those parking spaces contribute to the cost versus the businesses having to carry the burden of that cost. So we're balancing at all times, kind of preserving the historic district when we look at our budget and supporting the new construction. So we have, again, we have historic buildings where we have new owners of them, where they're doing new housing unit, rental units upstairs, and then they're doing improvements on the exterior and keeping the and preserving that historic element. We have one that will be interesting, and it just got approval through the agency board for an exception to the grant maximum, and that's where they're doing a combination, which is pretty interesting, where they're doing preservation of a building that where Green Thumb Florist was, right here on Commercial Street, but they're taking down the building on the back off the alley because it's not historic, and they'll build new units off the alley in the back as they preserve and protect the historic building on the front. So that will be the first one of this kind where we're actually doing a combination, new construction and preservation of a historic building. So when we're looking at a meeting with property owners and potential purchasers and developers, we're trying to figure out what is the best role for us to play. So if you looked at my budget, historically, you're going to see something called alley improvements. So at the time, somebody may be taking a grant for helping them recruit a business, similar to what you have. Beautification, expansion of a business, retention of a business. Again, we would have this other element to it where if they were going to do something significant in the alley, we would have a separate pot of money for alley improvements. There was a time, it's still in existence, but I didn't have any takers of the grant program at that time. We have a lot of vacancy in upper floors of buildings. And so we had a specific grant that you could access if you were going to take upper floors and address vacancy in upper floors. So for us, we're constantly looking at if there's a change in what the guidelines may need to be. Right now, we don't fund signage. We don't fund lighting. We don't fund cosmetic-y type of things on the outside of a building, but signage is one that comes up a lot because if a business moves, it's the first thing to go down and get changed. We try to put money into something that benefits every potential user of that building, not just a potential tenant. But we're balancing having money for historic and having money for new at all times. So this year in my budget, you're going to see a recommendation to do a separate grant to historic buildings only for them to add back a historical element on the outside of the building that may have been taken away over the years. So let's say somebody had a cornice on their historic building, but for whatever the reason, over the years, it's been removed. This would be a grant specific for you to put back the historic element. Well, we'll use the Landmarks Commission to work with us on that, to open up and review those applications for historic significance, and they would then play a role in choosing which project or multiple projects, depending on what comes in, that we would fund. Any questions so far? Okay, I'm trying to think of what else is in.
Hey, I've got a quick question, Cherry.
Yes.
How do you feel that with all the new housing coming into play, how do you see resources for those residents aligning with necessity, grocery, daycare, things of that nature? I mean, I know we talk about parking, but if I don't really feel like they have everything that they need right in the downtown core to not have a car. So like Safeway is too far. And so how is, your advisory board aligning with developers to kind of bring in those resources, or how are you working with the city to recommend that those resources be brought in?
So
closer.
Yeah, good questions, because probably every focus group that we've had in the last 10 years have said we want a grocery. We engaged a third-party consultant to do a grocery study for us to determine the feasibility and the viability of that. I know when South Block was being considered, because they had that large opportunity and they have all that parking, and grocery requires lots of parking. I know they engaged a third party, and that the results of that report was it wasn't feasible in that location. Grocery, you know, is very specific to the number of residents that you have. Every time we put a new housing project in downtown, we keep getting closer to meeting that threshold, but Safeway isn't that far away. But you're right, if I have 2 kids, I'm not going to drag my kids in a shopping cart that I'm not supposed to take off the property from Safeway into downtown. But grocery stores, they have this parameter as to so many cars within 5 minutes, so many cars within 3 minutes, has to be on the right side of the street. And then they want this parking at a time where it's in conflict with other goals to reduce people from being in cars. So the state's the one who mandated the removal of the parking, not the city, just so that you know. We would love to have grocery in downtown. If we can meet that threshold, clearly that would be something that would be great. I know that the premium location has always been where Rite Aid is, and maybe that is something that owner will consider thinking about there, because it has all that parking and it's great visibility coming across the bridge. For me, that site is probably the best site for something because of the size of it and because of its relationship with West Salem. You just can't miss that site. A proposal. Oh, go ahead.
So it sounds like traditional grocery may not work. And so how is thinking outside of the box and working with developers so that as these housing units are coming in, there's room for a small bodega, you know, that has cold cuts and more deli and might have a small produce section and, you know, things of that nature. That's not your traditional 7-Eleven or Plaid Pantry, you currently have one business, I believe, that's kind of operating like that in the Reed right now. But
Munchie's Market.
Yeah, Munchie's Market. And I think that that's kind of like the closest thing to a bodega that downtown really has. It leaves some to be desired, I think, still for residents, but you know, at least that business owner has found a gap. And but in the building process for some of these housing complexes,
well, typically
room
we
for
don't.
that.
Yeah, typically we don't dictate what somebody puts in their building. You know, when somebody comes in for a grant, they typically have a vision of how they're going to redevelop the property. I would think, though, just because everybody that is looking to invest here, I get asked constantly, you know, what is a need? What do you think people want? Who should we be outreaching to? That's always at the top of the list. I mean, that's why we did this study. I mean, there's Green Zebra that is small. There's Basic Market that is small. There's even Zupans, you know, that has a 21,000 square foot footprint versus a huge, you know, grocery store footprint. I know for a long time, everybody wanted Ross to do a smaller grocery store here in downtown. And of course, everybody wants Trader Joe's, if that's possible, a second location. So it will be something that I would think if I was a developer, knowing that we have this increased housing, that I would look at the feasibility of putting something in, like you said, even if it's smaller. Grocery stores, unfortunately, don't pay a lot because they're considered an anchor. And so they pay very little rent. So all the other little inlines, Fred Meyer's is a great example. You have a frame shop, you have a hair salon, you have all these other tenants around Fred Meyer's because Fred Meyer's doesn't pay a lot, but the other little ones do. So that's part of typically what a developer is looking at too. How high can the rents be? How can I have my project be financially feasible? But it's a great question, Jason. It comes up all the time, no different than the parking one does. You know, if we want these things, again, grocery is like, they always say we have to have so much parking. Even the brewery blocks that they did years ago on Burnside, where they put Whole Foods in there, it has a huge underground parking garage, even though people could walk there very easily. So it's on the list. We do need to think about where those connections are. Clearly for Block 50, you know, we're across the street. We've got, you know, Chemeketa parking structure. That should take away. I mean, if somebody wanted to do something more food-ish there, walking across the street would be pretty easy. So fingers crossed, we do need more food in downtown, but just for memory's sake, where Ritter's is, that particular, the prior property owner put in a very beautiful deli. It was beautiful, very nice, everything. And it didn't work. They went out of business. But I think the timing was wrong in that we didn't have, Councilor Barney's.
I fully agree that the timing was wrong.
The
other question that I
timing wasn't good.
The other question that I have is the Statesman Journal building. Is that within the scope of urban renewal for you guys in that?
So that's another great question, because like you guys, I'm sure, deal with the pain of wherever you have a boundary, there's something right outside the boundary. So the Statesman's Journal building is outside our boundary. I did attend a pre-app where somebody was looking at putting some storage in there and some commercial space. If you've never been in that building, it's fascinating because the north building, it's all on sidewalk level. You walk in and you can make sense of it. The south building, which looks like it's at sidewalk level, when you walk in, it's 3 feet down. So it's very difficult to imagine what you could do there. I mean, maybe if you were going to put in those tanks that you ferment something where you need, you know, a height and something lower and higher. But that's why that's been sitting there, because it's not what you see from the outside. It's very funky on that's a lot of square footage on the south side. It's not at sidewalk level. And so people have been trying to figure out where storage would make sense, because you wouldn't necessarily, you know, they could work with it and try to figure it out. And personally, since we have so many more residents coming into downtown, I think storage would be great. However, I'm not sure. This is where the danger of I get excited, I want everything, and it's not allowed in the zoning. Just like I want pet stores or I want a vet, it's not allowed. So when people say, what do you need? It's like, hey, you know, I think a pet store would do very good. I think a grooming for pets, because we have 2 pets for every 1 person now that's in a housing unit. Oh, I think a vet would do very well. It's not allowed. I felt really bad when I heard that, because I keep saying that, you know, you ask me what we need, that's what we need, you know, grocery and something for pets are kind of like the big thing in downtown right now. But again, I didn't know that was not allowed in downtown with the zoning. But yeah, it's just like where the cannery project is proposed outside of my boundary. You know, where YMCA, it's like, and Riverfront's boundary is really strange because it kind of weaves in and out. It goes up Broadway, but then, you know, it not all the way up Broadway. There's gaps in between. It's very strange boundary. But yeah, Statesman Journal, I get calls all the time about something just outside the boundary. Same with South Waterfront, because South Waterfront doesn't have a grant program. And so I get calls about the grant program, and it's outside of riverfront boundaries, but they touch each other. So any other questions like that? Good questions. Thank you so much. Let's see. So where are kind of my next opportunities? Cook Stationery, you know, they closed after being in downtown a very long time, and that building's for sale. So something fun and exciting may happen there. Anderson Florist on Court Street. That those people passed away, so that is another one that is up for sale. The challenge with that particular building that's different from Whitlock's and Cook's is that it has no exit off the back of the building. There's no way to get out. So that would limit being able to do housing, because you need to have the ability to get in and get out if you're a resident. So that's probably why Anderson's has been sitting there a while. And of course, the Pit and Salem Center and Great Harvest. That building is for sale. It says pending in the window. So typically, who's ever looking at it will probably call me and want to know about the grants and how we might be able to help get a tenant in there. The unique thing about downtown right now is how a building like Whitlock's can be pre-leased before the guy even takes ownership of it. So even though we have buildings with vacancy, there are some buildings with some property owners that they just have a knack of putting cool things in the window and their building's leased. It's the same with Green Thumb. His ground floor space is already leased before he even gets going, which makes it a lot easier to go to the bank and get financing when you have that pre-leasing in place. The housing has always been very successful. The pre-leasing goes very well, and most of them have waiting list. Let me see what else I have here. We also have, those challenges with, the consequences of those that are unhoused or the youth because it's not, all the challenges are not because of unhoused. There are most of the thievery and the graffiti is not a result of the unhoused. It's a result of, unfortunately, gangs and youth and people that are just doing crimes that they should not be doing. But we do have those challenges in downtown too. So most businesses have just changed kind of how their security is and increasing their security and just being more mindful of things that they didn't have to be mindful of in the past. We keep moving forward with our streetscape, similar to you. It will take years. I think the last phase, maybe 2030. So that's a high priority for us. But at the same time, and Tori, I was going to ask you this question. We have streetscape, a lot happens under the sidewalk so that we have the infrastructure to support those things that downtown hasn't been able to do because it has old infrastructure. So a lot of what you don't know is we're putting in all of the conduits for being able to have landscaping watered and holiday lights, being able to have plugins for those and locations for banners. But it didn't include funding for furnishings. So again, if you looked at my budget this year, you're going to see a line item for furniture to go along with the street improvements, sidewalk improvements. So benches and new trash receptacles, things like that weren't in my just ongoing budget for the sidewalk improvements is in a separate line item. So again, do you have yours, Tori, do you have money in your budget to cover those things?
We were waiting for redevelopment. So we have the surrounding old now clutch buildings and rain suites under demolition. So a lot of exciting things. That's what Sheree mentioned, that you go down there, a lot of changes are happening. So we're just waiting to see how those spaces materialize. If there's hopefully more ground floor commercial retail services, then it'll make more sense to locate, benches and things like that. So not in the current streetscaping that we're doing with 2nd Street, but we'll have places where we could put it. We just need to see where these building entrances go. We need it to make sense and align with what happens as a result of the redevelopment that follows.
So that could be something that in a future budget, you'll be talking about as far as if you want to engage somebody to take a look at where the appropriate locations would be for some additional amenities to pedestrians. I know in downtown, a lot of where the trash receptacles are, there would have been a prior user there that it would have made sense to have a trash receptacle there that is no longer there anymore. So having the trash receptacle there now may not make sense. But we engaged a third party to give us a plan of how to address where trash receptacles should go, no matter who your tenants are, because you can't move them every time all of a sudden you have a new restaurant open up, and so you're moving a can from one place over to a restaurant because you think people are going to walk out with more trash there. As a person who deals with trash personally in downtown constantly, most of the trash in the trash receptacles in downtown are not from a business, but are from people taking garbage out of their cars. So that's been a fascinating education for me. People walk out of their cars with whatever's in their car and they put it in the trash receptacles that are on the sidewalks. Some businesses, usually those with coffee, they have a high demand on those trash receptacles by them, but a lot of them do not. It's coming out of people just clean their car out as they're on their way to their job or into a shop. So again,
that's interesting.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
That is very interesting.
Well,
Sherry, I do want to be mindful of the time here. We probably have time for just one more question if anybody had a question for you. And so I wanted to open that up to the group really quick. And then we'll probably have to move on in our agenda. But I want to thank you for being here.
Yes,
and the information that you've provided is fantastic and have all sorts of wheels turning in my head.
I can't wait till you're down here.
Just a quick clarification. What is happening on the bottom floor of JCPenney's? I think I missed that.
I wish I could say. You didn't. The reason you're asking that question is I didn't say anything about JCPenney's. That particular property owner is in Portland, and they are holding out. They would like a tenant, even though initially they said they were going to break up the space on the ground floor and have more exits and entrances off of the sidewalk. That is not what they're doing now, based on my last conversation, which is disappointing. Happy New Year, all of you. Thank you so much again for this opportunity. I'll be back if you want me.
Thank you for being here.
You got it.
We'd love to have you again.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
Thank you. Let's see here. So we're going to open it up for that. That was a lot of really great information. And I was just like, oh, where should we put more benches? Do we need more trash receptacles? Like the thought of increasing amenities to pedestrians for West Salem. Anyhow, updates on West Salem organizations. Sam, do you have any from the Business Association?
I'm having a hard time with my mute this morning. Just that our next board meeting is January 10th. And we are located at Red Hawk Vineyard. Second Wednesday of each month at 3 o'clock. And then our next members meeting is January 25 over at Roth's, and guest speaker to be determined.
When is that event up at Red Hawk again?
That is our monthly board meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But the public is welcome to join.
I have no update for the neighborhood association. Can Counselor Varney, I know that you attend that meeting often. I don't know if you know what they're up to at the moment. I do know that they're looking, I did hear that they are seeking new venues for their meeting outside of Roth's. So Salem Town, Capitol Manor, taking the meetings to different areas of West Salem. So it'll be exciting to see how that comes together. Any other updates? Tori, next meeting topics? I think
Okay,
you have a list.
So, yeah, I did. I included, so since it's the first of the calendar year, it gets confusing, fiscal and calendar year. But the first of the year, since we kick it off with the budget discussion too, it's kind of the heavy stuff, and then it gets into other topics through the year. So I just put on here, just as some of these topics are repeat, the board has emphasized certain topics they want to revisit. So I just provided a list of things. This can change. This is your meeting. So if you see something that you want to expand on here, feel free to tell myself, tell Jason. We can talk about it, include it. If you don't see something you want to have addressed, then by all means, let us know and we can have it included. But then this is just generally topics that have been of interest to the group. And so tried to spread it throughout the year. For the most part, the advisory board meets monthly, with really the exception around July 3rd. The first meeting of July typically falls around the 4th. So the group usually takes that off. But aside from that date, pretty much every month the group meets. So I just tried to put in topics that fit based on that schedule and around budget timing. So again, if you have anything, you want to see anything different, let us know.
Hey, Tori. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
Can I make a suggestion for maybe like a guest speaker? A representative from Clutch to give us a detailed timeline of what to expect and just an update on second.
Sure. Yeah, I could see tied to their development plans and work that they're doing out there. Yeah, happy to extend that invitation.
That'd be awesome. Thanks, Tori.
Sounds good.
Tori, have we ever had anybody from ODOT come in and talk about a retaining wall or sound barrier for Edgewater?
No, not about a sound barrier. They've been, we've had now, I think every year we have representatives from ODOT just come and talk about general things tied to West Salem. I think we've had them come out to talk about permanent crossing at 2nd Street and why that wouldn't work, and how, you know, they could help out with this, you know, planned path improvement that we're talking about to connect to the railroad bridge, but nothing specific to a sound barrier wall.
That would be a major improvement to that green space. I also think for safety, and so that would be really
that
cool.
Could be talked about. Something that we could talk about too is, you know, you're entering an urban area, and it was brought up with the Urban Land Institute group when they studied it, working with ODOT to slow speeds and make it so it's not a fly through. I mean, you're slowing down to make the curves, or slowing down to come into downtown Salem. Since it's urbanizing, getting more infill, maybe there's a case to be made to not just have a sound barrier, but just slow traffic completely as you enter West Salem. So that's just something to think about. But no, not specifically about a sound wall.
And then there seems to be a lot of discussion about bathrooms in West Salem Park. Here and there, I've had it brought up by a handful of people recently that those bathrooms. And I don't know how we could help it as an advisory board. Help that
so
process.
The topic, there are bathrooms at the West Salem Park, right? Do they need to be updated or something?
They do need to be updated. They're pretty bad. And
I'm happy to bring the parks in and have them fill the heat for doing, you know, seeing what their plan is to update the restrooms, or I don't know about
Just a
financing
comment.
to build new bathrooms, but
Just a comment on that. I feel like if we updated, put more restrooms in, I feel like the maintenance would probably cost more than the actual remodel at some point, just because of the traffic that we have in the area. Just a comment.
That's
so
a
I
good
will
comment.
note, I think I will include that. So we have planned tentatively in March to have Public Works, and that's just generally with the bond and to your point about Marine Drive, Jason, so they could provide an update on Marine Drive North. So what I could do
Okay.
too is include parks to see what their plans are with maintaining, expanding, doing additional work at that restroom. So we could
Yeah,
get
or
an
even
update.
potential thoughts from Parks and Public Works on restrooms for the Edgewater green space. We really don't have any public restrooms, you know, on that side of town at this point. So,
yeah.
Anyhow,
Okay.
Great.
So I just feel like this wouldn't be a complete meeting if our signage wasn't brought up. Where are we at on that? Or
So
where?
I think last time yeah. So like I mentioned in the update, there's not really in the right of way along, and that's one of the things that I would say would be challenging to put a restroom in the right of way with, because it's ODOT controlled along Edgewater Parkway. So it'd be a matter of working with them to either have them transfer land. I don't even think they could transfer the land because it's a right of way. So we'd have to figure out a way to build it, maintain it in that section. So the same has been true with the sign. And then it gets into what a standard sign looks like. I think it took over a year for a new sign to be built. Like, I think it's the north side of town as you come into Salem, where it was a bit contentious among community members. And anyway, it was, so I think what we're looking at is we talked about art fixtures. There may be other creative ways to let people know that you're entering like the West Salem district, because it's hard to separate. You know, if you do a city sign, there's the standard template that's a gateway that says City of Salem. And it's not, you don't get the sense that you're in a different location, which is my understanding. What the group would like to see is a sense that you're entering into, you know, maybe you're around, you know, you're entering into Edgewater. So it's like the main street of West Salem specifically. So you're entering the West Salem district of Salem. So there, I think, probably some ways that we can address that creatively. So I think that's going to be some of the discussion this year. So no specific information to share as far as like we have a perfect location for this gateway sign. I think it'll be a more creative approach just to create a general sense within the district that you're in the West Salem district of Salem, basically.
And
But we
maybe
can
even
talk
something
about it through the
revenue
year.
generating. You know, areas that we could put up banners that people could also rent, you know, that space for events or soccer games or, you know, things of that nature. And when it wasn't being rented, you could have a banner up there that said, welcome to, you know, maybe that's a simpler solution. And I know revenue generation is a big topic for the city right now. So maybe there's a win-win in there somewhere.
So yeah, banner approach. Second Street will be a less utilized as far as like you know, Edgewater is a state facility, so we could have it still on the city side. We just have to work with them on clearances and things as you go through Edgewater. The nice thing about Second Street is totally city, and we talked about, you know, during certain times of the year potentially shutting down Second Street. Well, there's other ways you could maybe incorporate street signage. We have the ornamental signs through Edgewater and now on Second Street. The more you have that, you can have the banners and the things that reinforce the West Salem. You could even put up different types of lighting and stuff like that to, again, enhance it. So I think there are creative ways that we can address it, and we'll talk about it through the year. But yeah, I think that's a great point, Jason, to even have like a banner over Edgewater or something that could be changed out.
You're on mute, Sam. Okay. All right. Thanks for bringing up the signage. Any last comments or anything for the good of the order? Otherwise, I think we'll adjourn.
All right, just a reminder, we'll see you in person next month downtown.
At the Urban Renewal Department
Offices,
building.
yep.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. We'll see everybody there.
All right.